very nice to be here. This is my first time working in Flanders. I've visited once or twice, but my first time to find out what's going on. I'm looking forward to sharing some ideas with you and to finding out more about what you are doing. Please, if I speak too fast, wave at me or tell me to slow down, because I know your English, I'm sure, is good. It's much better than my Dutch, but maybe sometimes I'll speak a little too fast. So I want to really think about the idea of child friendliness, and my starting point is a quote from Enrique Pena Losa. He's a leading urbanist, a very charismatic man, and the former mayor of Bogota in Colombia. And he said, children are a kind of indicator species. If we can build a successful city for children, we will have a successful city for all people. And if you don't know about Enrique Pena Losa, he did many very radical and progressive things in his city. Had a very strong focus on public spaces, on streets, on opening up the city for ordinary people, ordinary families. And one of his most well-known initiatives is the ciclovias, the many kilometers of the city streets closed for traffic every Sunday so that families can come out and enjoy the streets and those public spaces. So I want to flesh out Pena Losa's insight, his idea, and see what that might mean for cities and for children. But I want to start by just saying a little bit about how children's lives have changed in the past 20, 30, 40 years. And I think, let me show you a map that will help me explain and show one of the biggest changes that's happened in childhood. And it's what I call the shrinking horizons of children's everyday lives. I want you to look at the map here on the right, and what this map shows you, it shows you what you might call the home territory or the right to roam of 4 children. But they're 4 children, each child is 8 years old, but they're 4 children in 4 generations of the same family, and they all lived in the same city. Yeah, so the big blob, the big area that takes up most of the map, that's the home territory of the great-grandfather at the age of 8 years old. So he could travel 10 kilometers across the city on his own. Then you can see the 2 smaller circles. That's the home territory of the grandfather, and then the home territory of the mother. And then you can see the little tiny black dot. The black dot up at the top left, that's the home territory of the 8-year-old son today. Oh, he can travel to the end of his street on his own. And in fact, this is in England, of course, we know that is more everyday freedom than most 8-year-old children in England have. In England, most 8-year-old children are not allowed to go outside their front doors. So this pattern of shrinking childhood freedom is happening not just in England, but across the developed world. I'm sure it's happening here in Flanders. Maybe not quite to the same degree, but it's happening around the developed world. And for me, this is one of the most profound changes in the nature of childhood. Most of my work is about thinking about and responding to this change in children's lives. Now, I just want to say a little bit more about this change and why it's happened. And I'm going to do some myth busting. Yes, there's some myths about why this has happened. And the first myth is that this is all about paranoid parents. Yes, anxious parents keeping their children in. I'm a parent myself. I'm sure many of you here are parents. I don't think that's the whole story. I also don't think that the reason children are indoors is because they don't want to be outdoors. So I'll just say a little bit about this. Now, if you think about parents and parents' views on safety and on their children's safety, you can put parents on a spectrum, yes? So at one end of the spectrum, you will find parents who are in the market for this product here. I don't know if you can see this product. These are knee pads for babies, yes? Knee pads for toddlers to stop them from hurting their knees when they fall on the ground, okay? About €6 from eBay. Then, at the other end of the spectrum, maybe you can see this headline. This headline, "Mother basked in sun, leaving children home alone." Okay, this is a story about a mother who went on holiday and left her children with some cornflakes and some milk in the fridge for a week when she went to the Mediterranean. So I think this end of the spectrum we'd say, maybe that's a little bit casual, yes? But most parents are somewhere in the middle, yes? Here are two parents, here's a couple who are in the middle. You don't know them, but these are the Shonrocks, Oliver and Gillian Shonrock. And about 4 years ago, they had a lot of media coverage, a lot of stories in the newspapers, because the Shonrocks wanted to let their children cycle to school. And the school, the children were 5 years old and 9 years old. And the school threatened to report the Shonrocks to social services, yes, to the child protection, because they thought it was dangerous. Now, I've met the Shonrocks, as I say. They're a very thoughtful, professional, responsible couple. Oliver is a lawyer, and this was in London, but it's a very leafy part of London. It's not, shall we say, it's not the Gaza Strip. It's very safe. But what's interesting about the Shonrocks is that they created a huge debate in England. Is it safe? Is it dangerous? We agree with the Shonrocks. We think they're being reckless. We think they're being crazy. The point about the Shonrocks is that, and maybe it's different in Belgium, I don't know, maybe it's very common for 5-year-olds to cycle to school in Belgium, I don't know, in Flanders? Maybe. But we can argue about that. But the point about the Shonrocks is that they were very clear. Their children wanted to cycle to school. They wanted their children to cycle to school. They were happy with that. They had practiced the route. They felt it was safe. And in short, the Shonrocks reject this argument, this thinking that says being a good parent means being a protective parent. Yes, being a good parent means being a controlling parent, means keeping your children close to you. They say no, you can be a good parent and still give your children freedom and help your children to be more confident and responsible. And I think maybe most parents are in the middle here. Of course, it varies, but we need to remember that different parents have different views, but a growing number of parents, I think, want to give their children more freedom and want help in doing that. So that's my first myth. My second myth is that this loss of freedom, this retreat from the outdoors, is all because children are not interested in the outdoors. So I'm going to tell you now briefly a study that I helped to carry out, where we interviewed 1,000 children between 5 years old and 11 years old, and we asked them some questions about their free time. this is one question. What do you do most often in your free time? That's the answer. Play on our consoles, okay? Sad, maybe not too surprising. Then we asked them, what would you like to do more often? And we gave them the same list, the same set of choices. And the top choice was play on our bikes and scooters. Okay, today's children have an appetite for experience. They want to get out of doors. Of course, their childhood is different, but they still want to get out and get to grips with the world around them. So that's my second myth. So now I'm going to move on and think a little bit more about child friendliness. What is child friendliness? What does it mean? I know you have a definition or some thinking about child friendliness that you've developed here in Flanders, but I'm going to give you my definition. And it draws on the work of Marketa Kitta. She's an academic from Finland, from Helsinki. And she is interested in children's everyday freedoms, how much freedom children have, and also how many things to do, how much is there to do in the places children live. So for her, a place that is child-friendly, this is where we are, here. We have a lot of things to do and a lot of freedom to get around, to get about and to do those things in the city. So there are two factors here. And I think that's a very useful definition. It takes us to think about what is it like to experience the city? What is it like to grow up, to gradually find out more, expand your horizons, meet people, be with your friends. So what does that mean? If we take that definition, which I agree with, I think it's a good one, what are child-friendly cities like? And of course this is a simple list, but I think this is the list that I want to suggest to you. That child-friendly cities are compact. It's places that we want to get to, that children want to get to, are not far away. And of course it is easy to get around. There are green spaces and playful places and lots of things for children to do. And people care about children. People look out for children. It's cozy for children, maybe? I don't know. This word, gezellig. Is it close? Close, yes? We will come back to gezellig later. So I'm going to give you one picture, one example of a child-friendly city or a child-friendly district. It's only one, of course there are others, but I think it helps to have a picture in our minds. And this is the district I want to use as a way to give you some pictures in your mind. So this is Hammarby Stad. It's a new district, or quite a new district in Stockholm. It was an old industrial site. It was actually the place where that was the focus of a bid to win the Olympic Games. Yes, the Olympic Games in Stockholm. But Stockholm didn't get the Olympic Games, but they built out the district anyway. And you can see, I think, I spent some time walking around and cycling around Hammarby. There are lots of places for children to play areas, different sizes, courtyard spaces, slightly bigger spaces, one or two, we say, district playgrounds, all over the district. There are also many lively, attractive public spaces, squares, meeting places. There is very good public transport straight into the city, and I'll come back to why I think that's child-friendly. And the district is also, is a place where it is easy to relax, to explore and to spend time in nature, yes, to just step away from the hustle and the bustle of the city. And also, Hammarby is a place where it is very easy to get around by bicycle or on foot. And one of the most interesting things about Hammarby is that families want to live in Hammarby. Families are coming to live in this quite dense urban part of Stockholm. And there are more families coming than was expected. So it shows you that if we can get the city right, if we can get these features that families are looking for, then families don't just flee the city and head out into the suburbs and into the rural areas. So that's one picture of a child-friendly city. So why do they matter? Why are they important? What's the bigger picture? And I want to really talk about 4 different reasons why I think child-friendly cities are not just good for children, but good for society, good for all of us. And I'm going to just say a little bit about each of these headings. Now, when you have speakers coming to talk about children's health and children's play and children's mobility, it is a law that you have to show a scary graph. So I'm going to show you a scary graph about child obesity. But this is a scary graph. This is, by the way, Belgium is not on this graph, but I think we can be fairly sure that if it was on this graph, it would show the same trends. This is a big health problem. It's a huge health problem around the world. Children getting fatter, becoming fatter adults, leading to all sorts of really serious diseases that restrict their lives and add a huge burden to health services. I'm not going to say any more about obesity, except to say that there is a link for children with being healthy and feeling good about yourself and well-being, yes? So let's broaden out the picture and think about children's well-being. And this is a chart that some really interesting work, again from England, where the researchers spent a lot of time looking at the different aspects of life that feed into children's overall subjective well-being. Yes, their sense of happiness, what makes them happy. And they crunched the numbers. They put all the numbers together and looked at them, and they found that the single thing that was most closely linked with children's overall well-being is choice. Yes, it's not family, it's not how they spend their time, it's having choice, having things to do. And I think it's very interesting if we think about that how important it is for children's overall sense of their well-being to feel that they have choices, that they have some independence, some freedom in their lives. This is a piece of work that looked at children's well-being in different countries and compared it with children's mobility, yes, with how easy it is for children to get around. The nice thing about children's mobility is we can measure it. We can compare different countries and see whether children walk and cycle more or less. And so you can see this, what this graph shows you is that there is a clear link between the countries where children have more mobility, where they can get around, where they do get around on foot or bicycle more often, and their well-being score. And these are both objective, hard numbers from international studies. The first study is from a piece of work that's about to be published from England, and this score along the bottom, this is from UNICEF, yes, some UNICEF, a big report on child well-being. Now, of course, this doesn't show that mobility causes well-being, it just shows that there is a link, but I think it's quite a strong link. You can see the graph is quite straight, and I think we can see that there is a connection. The third, I think, reason why we should care about child-friendly cities is if we ask ourselves, what does a child-friendly city look like? We realise that it looks very much like a sustainable city, yes, or a green city. The list is very similar. I hope you agree. And here's a case study, I think that a second case study, a second example that shows this very well. The nice thing about Freiburg is the whole city it's not just one district that is leading the way. The whole city is very green. It's a green city. It's been it's the city that's had the strongest support from green politicians in Germany. But across the city, you can see how these different features of compact size, easy to walk and cycle, good public transport, lots of green spaces, and a welcoming, lively atmosphere. And the last thing I want to think about, the last reason I think child-friendly cities matter, is around social cohesion. What makes cities socially safe, socially successful places? And I'm going to just read you a few quotes here from Jane Jacobs. I want a quick show of hands. How many of you have heard of Jane Jacobs? Quite a few. Okay, good. She was a big influence on my work, so I'm going to just read you about a paragraph from her book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. If you haven't read it, I recommend you read it. Even though it's now 50 years old, I think it will change the way you think about cities. And one of the interesting things about this book, Jane Jacobs devotes a whole chapter to the question of how children grow up in cities. And she says, here is the quote, "In real life, only from the ordinary adults of the city sidewalks do children learn, if they learn it at all, the first fundamental of successful city life, that people must take a modicum of public responsibility for each other, even if they have no ties for each other." Now that's quite a long sentence, quite a few words. What she's getting at there is how can cities function well? The answer is that they function well when people give other people consideration and care. When we think about and take a degree of responsibility for each other, even if we have no close connection. Then she says, this is a lesson nobody learns by being told. It is learned from the experience of having other people without ties of kinship or close friendship or formal responsibility to you take a modicum of responsibility for you. So she's talking about the give and take, and that as children grow up and as they see and experience and as they grow up themselves give and take with the people around them, they say, excuse me, you've left your traffic lights on, you've left your car lights on, you've dropped your wallet. Or an adult says, hey, you shouldn't run out into the street, it's dangerous. That rubbing along, that social contact is part of what introduces city children to what it means to grow up in a city. And she goes on. She talks about older children. As children get older, this incidental outdoor activity becomes less bumptious physically, entails more loitering with others, sizing people up, flirting, talking, pushing, shoving, and horseplay. Adolescents are always being criticised for this kind of loitering. In fact, you can find a quote from Plato, yes, from the ancient Greeks, criticising teenagers. But they can hardly grow up without it. And then she ends, and I think it's a really interesting point. The trouble comes when it is not done within society, but as a form of outlaw life. So what she says here is that the problem we should worry about is not teenagers being irritating or annoying. The problem is teenagers living their lives outside the rest of society, because then they don't have that experience of rubbing along. And I think that that argument is really crucial to understanding the journey of becoming an engaged and a responsible citizen. That those everyday, casual, frequent, spontaneous encounters between children and adults are the raw ingredients that feed that growth and that journey. And here's, I think, a nice example of how you can support those experiences. This is a story from the BBC, from our national news website. I don't need to translate it for you. I think you can see, but this is, as you may know, in Germany there are very strict laws on noise. Yes, you cannot make a noise on a Sunday. But children have been given permission to make a noise on Sundays. Can you see the quote at the bottom here? We have to consider the rights of children to shout while they are growing up. And that's a quote from the Department of Noise Protection. Okay, it's Heselic, I think, yes? For children, anyway. And the final reason why I think child-friendly cities matter is a big, chunky economic reason. And it's that if we think about the long-term health of cities, of cities continuing to be places where people want to live, where people want to work, and that can carry on functioning, that they need to have families, that families are a crucial part of the population in cities. And so my third case study is the example of the city of Rotterdam. I had hoped to visit Rotterdam while I'm over here, but it hasn't happened. But maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but Rotterdam, from what I can see, Rotterdam is the city that has put the most time and money into this idea of child-friendliness, into making the city more attractive for families to live in. And it started with the finding, with the numbers, the statistics that show it was the worst Dutch city to grow up in. The politicians realised that this was a problem. Families were leaving the city. It was harder to get people to come and live there. So they made it a political priority and gave a significant budget to a range of measures to make the city, and particularly some of the least, or some of the less attractive, some of the less well-off parts of the city, the downtown parts, more attractive to live in, and focused on improving streets and public spaces. And then they went back and they measured the difference and showed that these changes that they made were actually achieving results. And there's one more interesting thing I think about Rotterdam, and I know now things are a little different in Rotterdam and the politics have changed, but it still seems to me a very interesting case study. And there's one more aspect of this case study that is interesting to me. If you look at how Rotterdam, how the people worked with children and how they got children's views on this programme, yes, they talked with children, but I think they recognised that it's not enough to just go to children and ask for their views. That many children are not they can't imagine what they haven't seen. So it may not occur to children to think about wider pavements or getting rid of traffic, because that's not something they think is possible. The second thing that's interesting about this process is that the underlying values, the underlying vision, was one that the adults held and owned. And also, I think the third challenge when we're thinking about how we involve children is making sure we do it effectively. Yes, if you have a limited budget and a limited amount of time, of course we want to make sure that we're doing things that are going to work, but we also don't want to spend all of our money on carrying out surveys and and getting people to take photographs and draw plans. We want to use our money to make a difference, to make a permanent difference to the city. So I think the lesson around participation is ask the right questions and use the right people. Make sure that the adults who are involved have a clear sense of direction. And that's why I talk about co-production, adults and children coming together. Okay, so the last part of my talk is really thinking about what are the challenges, what are the obstacles, what are the barriers that we face that stop us from making cities more child-friendly. And I'm just going to talk about 3 and offer some thoughts. This is difficult. I think it is difficult. I'm not saying anyone has all the answers, but here are some problems, I think, that I'm going to talk about. The first is demographic change. Yes, in particular, across the developed world, the profile of populations is changing, and crucially, there are many more older people, and I think the question about the relationship between the generations is a problem. The second challenge I'm going to talk about is car dependence. For me, that's the single most important reason why children have lost freedom over the decades, have lost their everyday freedom. And then the third challenge I want to touch on is perhaps the big one for you, maybe going back to your workplaces, to your municipalities. How can you win over political support, public support for this vision? So I'm going to say a little bit about each of these 3 things. First, this problem of demographics, and it was nicely illustrated to me when I was in Australia, and I went to see this neighbourhood, and maybe you can't see, this is a skate park, okay? It's a brand new skate park, and these are houses. You can see they're quite a long way away from the skate park, but the people who lived in those houses, older people, fought against the skate park, and they fought hard, and they fought for years, and it took years to get this skate park finished. And I think that what this shows you is, of course, there has always been tensions between the generations. That's no new thing. But I think these conflicts, this tension is getting worse. Of course, children can't vote, so that's one disadvantage. And also, I think, as we see growing numbers of older people, they're becoming a more powerful force, a more powerful political force. So here, in this municipality, it took the mayor, it took political leadership to get this project finished. And I think that's one of the lessons here, that we need our politicians to stand up for children more. My second challenge is around the problem of car dependence. This is a nice illustration. This is again from an Australian study. And Karen Malone, an Australian academic, she gave children cameras and she asked children to take photographs of their everyday lives. Yes, just lots of photographs with a camera. And more than half of the children in her sample had photos like this one, yes? Just photos from the back seat of the car. So we have cars are a problem not just because cars create traffic and traffic creates danger, but because children and families become dependent on the car. So for many children, they just don't experience their neighbourhoods firsthand. They only see them through a windscreen. But I think we're seeing some changes in our relationship with the car. This is some statistics from your Belgian traffic statistics people, and it shows you the growth in car traffic for the last 35 years. Now, that's, again, it's quite a scary graph, but the point, and just worry about the overall figures, yes? The point is that the graph is levelling off, yes? It's going up like that, and now it's going up like this. And that's it's not just because of the recession, it's not just because of the economy. This is a longer term trend. And we are seeing this trend in many nations. Actually, if I'd showed you the graph for the UK, it's actually going down. We're seeing a drop in car traffic. And we're seeing a drop in car traffic in Melbourne, a drop in car traffic in New York. We're seeing fewer young people buying cars. It's just too expensive and they have other interests. So what that means is that we can start to see that the world might look like a different place. We can start to see what some people call peak car, yes? And that we don't have to assume that streets will become more and more busy and we'll have to do more and more, we'll have to take more and more space and give it to the cars. In fact, we can start to turn that around. We can start to take space away from the car and give it back to people. And this is a really interesting movement in the UK that's doing precisely that. And I know you have some similar projects, a little bit similar here in Flanders, but this is local residents who come together to organise short road closures. Yes, one day a week, maybe for an afternoon, but every week, so that not for the Queen's birthday, not for the Olympics, but just so children can come out and play. And what's interesting is that this is coming from the bottom up. It's coming from families and residents, and it's coming from neighbourhoods who are saying, maybe we've got the balance wrong. Maybe we've just given too much space and time to cars. And let's see what happens if we try things differently. And when they try things in many neighbourhoods, they discover that they like what they see, that they like what happens, that children can play outside more, families get to know each other, and you get a bigger and a stronger sense of community. And so, what this shows us is that when we think about these challenges that we're facing, one of the ways that we can overcome them is to build a common vision, some shared goals about what the future might look like. And again, in England, we have a very interesting growing alliance, a movement of individuals, of charities, of NGOs coming together. And actually it's under the banner, the umbrella is reconnecting children with nature, yes, getting children out into nature. But what's really interesting about this movement is that it's not just about nature, it's also about freedom. It's about giving children back freedom. And this is potentially a very powerful network. It's got some big charities involved. One of the charities, this is really interesting, one of the charities that supports this network is the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds. Yes, not the protection of children, but the protection of birds. They have realised that if we want the next generation to care about the environment, to care about wildlife, then we need to make sure they have the experiences that will make them care. So that we have the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds supporting road closure schemes in local neighbourhoods. So this vision of restoring children's freedoms is one that can bring together a really varied group of allies. And so maybe you've been thinking that this idea, this goal of once more giving children freedom, of children roaming free, is an unrealistic goal, yes? It's just nostalgia. Those days have gone. Well, I think that's wrong. I think that actually the vision of giving children back some freedom is one that has captured and is capturing the public's imagination. This is a poster for a campaign by the British charity Sustrans. Yes, Sustrans, Sustainable Transport. It's a transport charity that is campaigning to restore children's everyday freedoms. And so this is the vision that I'm offering you, and this is the vision that I put forward in my work and in my website, and you can find out more about my work here. And so I'm inviting you now to work with me to give children back the freedom of the cities, and that if we do that, we'll give a better life to children and we'll give a better future to cities as well. Thank you very much.